On a Tuesday in October, my kitchen was where my wife announced she was pregnant while cradling a cup of chamomile tea. Her slow, calculated smile suggested she was handling the situation rather than fully experiencing it. The type of smile that didn't reach her eyes. As an OBGYN with over 2,000 deliveries in Phoenix under my belt, I understand conception timelines to the week, sometimes even the day. Standing there holding my coffee, I realized the baby she was carrying wasn't mine, as the calculations didn't add up. It simply couldn't be with our schedules. However, she was unaware of one critical detail. 6 weeks earlier, I had already anticipated this development. I am Dr. Brennan Calloway, a 46-year-old board-certified OBGYN at Desert Ridge Medical Center in North Phoenix, Arizona. 15 years of establishing privileges at 2 hospitals, a marriage thought to be solid until 8 weeks prior to a Tuesday in October, marked the start of my discovery that the 2 individuals I trusted most had been deceiving me. This is an account of how a solitary medical fact, something I've dedicated my career to explaining to others, became the catalyst for dramatic change. If it's genuine, raw stories like this you seek, click subscribe now. Every week I'll share similar tales. Comment below about Lacey's expression when she realized I was aware, and if someone in your circle needs to hear this story, share it with them. Let's dive in, as the backstory is crucial to understanding the events that unfolded. 11 years ago, Lacey and I crossed paths at a charity event for Valley Wise Health in Phoenix's downtown area. At that time, she was 31 and served as a senior event coordinator for a distinguished hospitality company. She had an uncanny ability to enter a room filled with surgeons and administrators, making each individual feel like the most important person they'd ever encountered. Over time, I assumed this talent of hers was exclusively reserved for those she deeply cared about. 2 years following our initial encounter, we tied the knot in an Arizona Biltmore wedding during springtime, which Lacey meticulously planned herself. Her expertise extended to the color scheme, floral arrangements, and lighting, demonstrating her remarkable talent. As I stood at the altar, I felt certain that I was the most fortunate man present. For the initial 7 years of our marriage, we maintained a strong bond. Although not without faults, nobody is. I worked excessively. She accommodated. Her job required frequent travel, and she was understanding about it. In our Arcadia residence, we orchestrated destination weddings, corporate retreats, and galas. We maintained a rhythm, leading a life of comfort with a pool and a lemon tree in the backyard that Lacey planted after moving in. However, fissures emerged subtly, as they often do. Approximately 2 years ago, Lacey's social circle underwent a transformation. She had always been close to friends, but she began spending an increasing amount of time with a particular clique she met through the Camelback Women's Foundation, a charitable organization. These women were predominantly wealthy, wives of developers, executives, and even an orthopedic surgeon whose practice dwarfed mine. They frequented restaurants in Scottsdale where a bottle of wine cost what many people paid for a car payment. Diane Forsyth was the one who became Lacey's most intimate friend within this group. Diane embodied everything that Lacey had quietly aspired to be: rich, beautiful. Effortlessly poised, Lacey was wed to Greg Forsyth, who managed a real estate development company across Phoenix, Scottsdale, and Dallas. A man of refinement, Greg would make appearances at charity events in custom-tailored suits, discussing his business portfolio as casually as others discussed the weather. Success seemed like an inevitable part of his life's climate. Lacey cherished Diane, which led to more time spent with Greg. I tried to convince myself that they were just friends, social associates of our coupledom. We dined together at Cartwright's Sonoran Ranch in Cave Creek one July evening, sipped drinks on a rooftop bar in Scottsdale's Old Town. Across from Greg Forsyth, I conversed about mortgage rates and real estate development, finding him agreeable, charming in the polished manner that successful men frequently display. I didn't feel intimidated. Instead, I felt somewhat uninterested. That was my initial error. Failing to fully grasp what was unfolding before me, the girls' trip had been Diane's suggestion made in February. A long weekend getaway to San Diego was her proposal. Only women this time. 6 individuals from the Camelback board, among them Lacey. The destination: the Pendry Hotel, a place nestled in downtown San Diego. If you haven't been there, it isn't somewhere one goes to sit and read paperbacks in silence. Instead, it offers rooftop pools, craft cocktails, and an atmosphere tailored to make people feel that their everyday lives are insignificant. Lacey expressed her enthusiasm for the trip excessively. For 2 weeks prior to departure, she couldn't stop talking about it, showed me the hotel website on her phone, shared details of the restaurants they would visit, and asked if a new dress for the trip was justifiable. I agreed and wished her an enjoyable time. Truly, that's what I meant. On a Thursday in the second week of March, all 6 set off, departing from Sky Harbor Airport, Terminal 4 on a direct flight. I personally drove Lacey to the airport and gave her a farewell kiss at the drop-off point. She clasped my hand before exiting the car. I went home and worked the entire weekend, with 2 deliveries on Friday night and a complex presentation for an upcoming continuing education seminar. I messaged Lacey both mornings, receiving photos in return, images of poolside drinks, group dinners at dimly lit places with elegant presentation, smiling faces. Everything appeared as expected. They returned on a Sunday evening. Upon entering the living room, Lacey walked in tanned and relaxed, her carry-on following behind her. She hugged me, expressed her missed presence, poured herself water, and retreated upstairs to unpack. And that was that until it wasn't. 3 weeks post-San Diego trip, I unexpectedly met a colleague at Desert Ridge, Dr. Cardiologist Paula Whitfield, who participated in the same poker group as Greg Forsyth, casually mentioned in an elevator ride that she heard Greg was in San Diego during the same weekend as your wife's trip. She spoke as if it were common knowledge. "Quite a coincidence, isn't it?" she commented, though I suspect it may not have been mere chance given Greg's character. The elevator doors parted, and she exited, leaving me to ponder her statement while continuing my ascent to an unneeded floor. The revelation that Greg Forsyth was in San Diego during the same weekend as your wife's trip left me in thoughtful contemplation. Upon returning to my office, I found myself sitting at my desk for an extended period, mulling over every moment since Lacey's return from that trip. Her subdued demeanor, her frequent phone checks, her unusual attentiveness in cooking unfamiliar meals and asking about my days with increased concern, these were signals I initially thought indicated a rejuvenating trip. However, they now seem to portray something else. As a physician, I avoid jumping to conclusions based on instincts. I require evidence. So I didn't accuse Lacey, didn't contact Greg Forsyth, and avoided any dramatic actions. Instead, I adopted a clinical approach, similar to handling a complex case, gathering data, recognizing patterns, allowing the facts to reveal the story without imposing interpretations. Over the following 3 weeks, I observed a consistent pattern that could only be explained in one way. She avoided me, carrying a car charger for an unknown phone, mentioning a work dinner with someone on a Wednesday night which she later slightly misremembered. Small occurrences, individually insignificant but collectively forming a pattern. I also did something I'm not proud of but would repeat. I contacted the Pendry Hotel in San Diego. I didn't lie per se. I inquired about a charge on a card linked to the reservation under the name Forsyth, questioning the bill. The receptionist was helpful, as hotel staff often are. She verified that a reservation under that name had included a suite. She added unsolicited that the suite had housed 2 guests. 2 guests. Greg Forsyth was not alone in San Diego. I remained parked in the garage beneath Desert Ridge Medical Center for 17 minutes following my call. Climbed upstairs to assist with childbirth, as scheduled, and the newborn showed no interest in my private affairs. This event occurred 6 weeks prior to the Tuesday morning when Lacey informed me of her pregnancy. During these 6 weeks, I was engrossed in contemplation, computation, preparation. Not out of resentment, that's not my character, but because I had a strong conviction that I needed to grasp the entire scenario before making any move, as whatever decision I took next would significantly alter the trajectory of our lives. I am an OBGYN. I comprehend better than most about what pregnancy entails in terms of timing. The standard gestational period lasts roughly 40 weeks from the final menstrual cycle. A home test for first trimester detection is usually possible between 4 to 5 weeks following conception. That Tuesday in October, when Lacey visited me with her tranquil smile and chamomile tea, she shared the news of a pregnancy test that morning. In response, I unexpectedly returned a smile. "This is remarkable," I exclaimed. "I'm guessing you're around 5 or 6 weeks pregnant," I said. She wasn't certain. We decided to schedule an ultrasound. As I calculated the dates mentally, I realized conception had occurred in early to mid-September. However, the San Diego trip in March was not the concern. There was something else. Something Lacey was unaware of: a vasectomy performed on me in late July, a fact I hadn't shared with her. I need to explain how this came about because it might seem unusual. The procedure wasn't something I had discussed with Lacey beforehand. Over time, we discussed whether to have children, not arguing, but simply conversing, maintaining a certain ambiguity. Neither of us had been forceful on the matter, leaning neither way. As I aged and my professional obligations increased, I grew comfortable with the notion that we wouldn't become parents. I believed Lacey felt the same, as she never pressed the issue. In July, during a routine health check, my doctor and I discussed it. I made up my mind. I arranged the procedure. I told myself I would bring it up with Lacey when the moment seemed right. I thought of it as a personal health decision rather than a unilateral one. I was preparing to tell her, figuring out how. And then I learned about San Diego. So I kept quiet about the vasectomy. It stayed hidden, like an unopened letter in a drawer. When Lacey informed me in October that she was pregnant, I instantly grasped what it meant. For years we'd built trust, but she had been unfaithful. The child she claimed as mine wasn't truly mine. She either didn't realize I knew or bet on me blindly accepting it. On that Tuesday morning in my kitchen, a decision was made. I chose not to give her the sealed envelope yet. As usual, I went to work, attended patients, scrutinized charts, and at lunch dialed attorney Shelby Hartman, whom colleague Rowan Decker had employed 2 years prior for a tricky property dispute. I trusted Shelby's thoroughness and discretion. I outlined my predicament to her without interruptions. She listened intently. After a moment's pause, she replied, "Doctor, before discussing further steps, let me ask you a question first. Do you possess records regarding your vasectomy procedure?" To which you responded affirmatively. These include records from the procedure itself, confirmations of successful outcome, all housed within your medical file. She replied, "Good, that means the timeline can be medically substantiated. That's crucial." We spoke for about 40 minutes. Shelby was not emotional. Instead, she was precise and formal, a trait I appreciated. She explained the process for asset dissolution according to Arizona law, discussed marital property details, what we needed to prove, and when. After our conversation, I had a clear understanding of my upcoming 6 weeks. At the same time, Lacey was planning. It was evident in how she navigated our days. She became more affectionate towards me, more attentive, suggesting small gestures like dining at a restaurant we used to love in downtown Scottsdale, a farm-to-table place on Brown Avenue that we hadn't visited in about 2 years. I agreed to go. We visited. I sat opposite her, discussing her sister's impending visit, an article on water conservation in the valley, and whether we should repaint the house exterior before summer. At one point, she extended her hand across the table and held mine. "I'm quite positive about this," she expressed, referring to the pregnancy, our relationship. I glanced at her hand covering mine, her fingertips, the ring I had placed on her finger in an Arizona-Biltmore garden. "I agree," I replied. A call from Diane Forsyth came during a Thursday afternoon, 3 weeks after Lacey informed me. Between appointments, her name popped up on my cell phone. Diane knew my number due to group texts and event coordination discussions over time. We were cordial rather than close, but still cordial. I picked up the call. She required a chat with me. Her voice was tense, controlled as people's voices often are when they are about to lose control. I responded, "All right." She disclosed information about Greg, San Diego, everything. I expressed the need to discuss this in person. The next morning on a Saturday, we met at a coffee shop on Camelback Road. She was there before me, seated in a secluded booth with an untouched cup of coffee, her hands flat on the table. Diane Forsyth, always composed, seemed almost structurally arranged to me. But that morning, facing me, she appeared like a structure missing its supporting pillars. She discovered messages on Greg's phone. She didn't divulge the means. She merely stated their existence and how they confirmed San Diego wasn't a chance encounter, but a premeditated plan, with instances prior to San Diego lasting for months. I admitted knowing or suspecting. I shared what I'd discovered, my calculations, and what I hadn't told Lacey yet. You looked at me and Diane declared, "Lacey is expecting." There was no doubt in her tone. "Affirmative," I replied. She had informed me 3 weeks prior. A prolonged silence ensued after that. Eventually, she disclosed, "Greg remains unaware, or if he does, he hasn't shared it with me. He's been attempting to justify the messages. He's been asserting they were insignificant. He's been behaving like a man cornered, resorting to lies with diminishing fervor." Inquiring about her plans, she admitted she was uncertain. She revealed she had not slept for 4 consecutive nights. She shared her concerns about their daughter aged 9 and son aged 12, pondering the implications of this news on them. I echoed my initial thoughts. We conversed for 2 hours without shedding a tear. In retrospect, I recognized we were both individuals in disbelief, attempting to project an image of normalcy and achieving it fairly well. As we parted, Diane paused at the door. "When will you inform Lacey about your knowledge?" I responded. "Soon." She nodded in agreement. "I plan on disclosing to Greg tonight that I've uncovered everything. I thought you ought to be aware of that fact." She departed. I remained in my car in the parking lot for some time, observing a group of adolescents cycling across Camelback despite the light. A typical Saturday morning scene in Phoenix. It was about to be revealed that someone's husband had been harboring a secret his wife knew. Meanwhile, in my house right now, the woman who knew was likely seated at the kitchen table with her tea, oblivious to the fact that the hushed discussions taking place around her were poised to erupt into a cacophony. Lacey was attending her yoga class when Greg phoned my cell phone that Saturday afternoon. I answered. He said, "I believe we need to discuss things." I concurred. He said, "Diane told you." I replied. Diane merely validated what I had already discovered. Another moment of silence ensued. Greg Forsyth was a man accustomed to commanding rooms, deals, and conversations. However, he no longer held that power, and I could sense him struggling to regain it. "Brennan," he spoke, only able to offer an apology he wasn't sure I wanted. "I don't need your apology," I replied. "What I require is clarification about one matter." He inquired, "Which matter?" "The pregnancy," I stated. "Are you aware of it?" After a prolonged moment of silence, he acknowledged it. Lacey had informed him before she had fully disclosed to me. She was juggling both of us. "Then you ought to be informed," I said, "that certain medical circumstances will arise during this process. Prepare yourself for these." He started to respond, but I cut off any further discussion, stating that all communication from now on should go through my lawyer. I terminated the call and returned to preparing dinner. Lacey arrived home from yoga 40 minutes later, her hair damp, skin flushed, emanating a unique glow post-workout. She kissed my cheek, inquired about my project, placed her bag, and poured a glass of water. Everything was routine. I pondered on the lemon tree she planted in our backyard during the first spring after we moved in. I thought, not yet. The discussion with Lacey unfolded on a peaceful Sunday morning 2 weeks later, which I had carefully arranged, not scripted though. I knew what I needed to convey and in what sequence. I had spoken to Shelby twice more since then. I was now fully prepared. Lacey sat at the kitchen table sipping her tea. The soft Sunday morning light streamed through the sliding door, revealing our backyard and the lemon tree. She was engrossed in her phone screen. All was silent. I took a seat opposite her with my coffee. Upon looking up and smiling, she asked, "What's on your mind?" "You seem to require a conversation regarding pregnancy." Initially, her smile remained, though it soon began to wane as she recognized the unease in your tone. It was not instant, rather a gradual fade similar to a signal losing reception. "What's this about?" she inquired. "I have a direct question for you, one that requires honesty," I replied. She put down her phone and clasped her mug tightly. "Brennan, what's the issue?" I responded. "Lacey, who is the father of the baby?" As anticipated, she became motionless in the same way I've seen people do when confronted with information their bodies have yet to process or understand. Her face stiffened. "What are you referring to?" she asked, her voice calm and measured. "I am an OBGYN, I said. "I can read a timeline. In July, I underwent a vasectomy, making the pregnancy you're experiencing not mine." A look of shock overcame her, akin to a light extinguishing. She remained silent, her gaze fixed on me. I could see her attempting to reframe this discussion into something bearable and failing. "I've already consulted with an attorney," I informed her, "specifically Shelby Hartman from Arizona, who specializes in high-asset divorces. Our conversation has been quite beneficial. Additionally, I've spoken with Diane Forsyth, a person you may want to know has been aware of the situation for several weeks." Lacey placed her mug on the table. Her hands trembled subtly but noticeably. "Brennan," she said, her voice cracking slightly on my name once. Cleanly broken. "I won't approach this as a confrontation," I said. "Instead, I will share what's going to happen and ask for your honesty, as I believe we both deserve that much." She nodded in agreement. A minimal nod. "We're going to terminate our marriage, as Shelby has initiated the necessary documentation. Since Arizona is a community property state, the process should be streamlined. However, managing the house remains an issue, but she's optimistic about the resolution. I don't intend to complicate this situation further. What I truly seek is to comprehend how we arrived at this juncture." After another extended silence, a mockingbird began its serenade in the lemon tree, a sound that echoed clearly. How long has this been going on? I inquired. She glanced at her hands. Approximately 8 months, she replied. That's longer than San Diego, I remarked. Yes, it was before San Diego. San Diego was. A significant turning point, a shift from the clandestine to something more genuine, wasn't it? Did you love him? I probed. She raised her gaze towards me then, her eyes glistening but not yet shedding tears, held together by sheer determination. I believed I did, she admitted. I think I was bewildered about my feelings. So now, she added after a pause, he ended the relationship once Diane found out. Greg Forsyth, the man always poised and successful yet casual, abruptly left when his world faced danger. A void in my chest, indescribably sorrowful, filled me not for her nor myself, but for everything. For the lemon tree the Arizona Biltmore, every ordinary Sunday that vanished forevermore, never to return quite the same. There's something you need to comprehend, I said. I have been cautious and honest, acting in what I believe is the most dignified manner. But I will not continue this marriage. It's a topic we won't revisit. She made no counter-argument. Perhaps deep within she had known from the start that there was no argument to be made. What about, she began. The child is yours, I said. You hold all rights regarding it. What decisions you make are your own to decide. She didn't feel capable of getting involved in that predicament, and she believed it wouldn't benefit anyone if she tried. Quietly, as one might lay down a heavy burden, she covered her face with her hands. I rose and carried my coffee to my office. There were patient records to scrutinize because Monday was approaching regardless of the events in my kitchen, as the nature of the job I'd chosen necessitated such unwavering progress. For the first time in months, I felt grateful for this steadfast forward momentum of a profession that required everything from me and left no room for standing still amidst my own wreckage. The next 3 months were practical months. As expected, Shelby Hartman was meticulous. The dissolution was finalized in November. By Arizona standards, the process was straightforward. The Arcadia house was transferred to Lacey following a buyout of the equity I'd contributed since our purchase. My retirement funds and practice assets were clearly defined. No disputes occurred regarding furniture, the vehicle, our joint funds, or the proposed vacation property in Sedona that we eventually deemed impractical. Instead, we maintained a civil relationship, characterized by people who have loved and hurt each other before. I relocated to a rental house in the Biltmore district in December. The tranquil neighborhood with its serene streets and well-established trees appealed to me, and I started constructing a solitary space tailored to my own needs. Not smaller in essence, but different hushed in ways that were frequently difficult and often uncomfortable. Diane Forsyth filed for divorce from Greg during the same week as myself. She temporarily moved her children to her sister's house in Tempe while the preliminary divorce proceedings were settled. I ran into her only once in January at a coffee shop near the medical center. She appeared tired, but more resolute than she had been in the booth on Camelback Road. We conversed for approximately 20 minutes. We weren't particularly close friends, and it was unlikely we ever would be, but there existed an unspoken bond between us that didn't necessitate verbal communication. We were two individuals who had endured the same difficult lesson from the same origin, and separately we had traversed its aftermath. As far as I know, Greg Forsyth, according to whispers in the intersecting Phoenix social circles, had hired a lawyer and was challenging certain aspects of the asset allocation. I suspected he would discover that Diane was a formidable adversary more than he anticipated. She was the type of woman who had spent years projecting an image of calm and yielding, while in reality, she was meticulous to a fault. Lacey gave birth to a girl during springtime. I learned about it only because my lawyer mentioned it as a formality related to some ongoing documentation concerning our divorce proceedings. I didn't send her a card. I didn't get in touch. I wished her no ill will. Closed doors don't need another opening. I wish to share what I discovered since I believe this tale outweighs the deception at its heart. I invested numerous moments in those quiet months of preparation, the 6 weeks between knowing and disclosure, pondering over something I feel I hadn't scrutinized before, the question of what I had been prepared to ignore. As a physician, my training involves observing, asking specific questions, and collecting data without allowing hope or bias to alter the truth as it appears. Yet, for months, I elected not to ask the questions that would have provided information I didn't desire. I was aware on some level that something wasn't right. The year prior to San Diego differed in ways I attributed to the usual strain of a long marriage. the common distances that amass between two individuals whose lives are crowded with other responsibilities. I opted for this explanation because it was tolerable. I opted for an explanation that enabled me to carry on, and this isn't uncommon. I witness it frequently among my patients. There's the woman who postpones her mammogram for 2 years because she's not prepared for the results, or the man who neglects to discuss his chest pain due to fear of its implications. The human mind is remarkable in its ability to shield itself from information it's not ready to handle. However, I've come to this conclusion as I sit in my rented house in the Biltmore area on tranquil evenings with a book, wine, and a sense of peace I haven't felt in years. Information doesn't improve with delay. Truth doesn't lose its validity because you turn away from it. In fact, when you confront it directly, when you face the raw, unaltered facts of your situation, you discover what you're truly composed of. As an OBGYN based in Phoenix, Arizona, I've spent my career at the crossroads of some of humanity's most profound moments. Life commencing, challenging truths being conveyed, families being created and occasionally shattered. I have accompanied women during some of their toughest experiences, striving to provide them with honesty and the means to cope. I believed I excelled at this in my career. It wasn't until losing my marriage that I realized I needed to apply the same compassion to myself. Recently, a colleague who works alongside me at Desert Ridge, a diligent third-year resident named Kelsey Holt, visited my office with an unexpected question. She had learned, as staff in hospitals often do, some version of my past year's events. She wasn't seeking specifics. She was searching for something more straightforward. She inquired, "How can one continue when the foundation crumbles?" I pondered for a while. Kelsey was 29 at the start of her journey. She deserved a genuine response. "You were speaking, do your tasks, not because they'll mend what's fractured, they won't, but because they serve as a reminder of who you truly are, distinct from the turmoil around you. The tasks embody an authenticity that other aspects may lack sometimes. And on those days when you struggle to recognize yourself beyond the wreckage, you can at least identify with being the one who helps someone in need. And that's sufficient to navigate the day. Mostly enduring the day is enough." She acknowledged this and resumed her rounds. I returned to my records. Through the window of my office, the fiery Phoenix afternoon was performing its usual act. Blazing, colossal, indifferent to every petty human drama unfolding beneath it. The Sonoran Desert has been around for millions of years. The saguaros in the distance have weathered droughts, floods, and temperature fluctuations that would crush many things. The sense of steadiness in acknowledging it is palpable. I acknowledged it. My name is Dr. Brennan Calloway, aged 46, a practicing OB-GYN in Phoenix, Arizona. Nearly a year ago, my wife disclosed she was carrying another man's child. She underestimated my perception. She misjudged because the truth in both medicine and life cannot be concealed. It will eventually surface. It always does. The world beneath you crumbles. But if you're perceptive, if you're prepared to undertake the challenging and unglamorous task of reconstruction, you discover what was hidden all along. At times, it proves stronger than anticipated. Other times, it's precisely what you were searching for. What struck me most profoundly about this narrative wasn't the betrayal or even the pregnancy. It was the 6 weeks he remained silent, 6 weeks of knowledge and continued decency. Most individuals might have imploded on their first day, and it wouldn't be unexpected. However, there is something distinctive about someone who inhales before they disintegrate, ensuring they are stable before taking action. It seems we all encounter situations that could derail us. The question lies in whether we react impulsively or respond thoughtfully. Those are two entirely distinct actions. Simply share your thoughts below. Would you have waited or confronted immediately? I am genuinely curious to hear your opinions. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now would be the ideal time. We provide such stories weekly.